Can you see my window? Can you see the presentation?
You are now unmuted.
We can see
You are now muted.
not the presentation, you can see the virtual classroom.
And the presentation now?
No.
Oh, okay, wait. Now? I didn't hear.
You can see.
You can see.
Yeah.
Okay, so I do remember. Which vertebra is this one?
The atlas.
The atlas, C1. Okay, here, if you remember, here we don't have body. We have only lateral masses, left and right, and two arcs, anterior and posterior. This one here, this foramen here. Can you see the name? If you remember, this is transverse process, and on it we have transverse foramen. We have articular surfaces for the occipital bone and for the axis. Here is C2, the axis actually. We have body, odontoid process, again transverse processes with transverse foramen, and one spinous process which is bifurcated. About the thoracic vertebrae, the body is larger or bigger than the cervical. What we have here.
Screen is stuck on
the body. We have what? This one and this one.
The slides are stuck, the PowerPoint.
You can't see the PowerPoint.
We can see only slide 15. It's stuck on slide 15. Okay, now it's changing.
Yeah, you can see now number 19, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So about the thoracic vertebrae, on the body we have two facets, one superior and one inferior for the rib head. On the transverse process we have facet for the rib tubercle. That's the difference. So for the cervical vertebrae, you have to remember the transverse foramen. For the thoracic vertebrae, you have to remember the rib the facets for the rib on the body and on the transverse process. Now, did you see the lumbar vertebrae here?
It's still on the thoracic vertebrae.
Oh my God, why?
Now it changed.
Okay. I don't know why. About the lumbar vertebrae, what we have here? Transverse process with three additional processes. The accessory process here, the mammillary process, this one and this one. And we have, of course, articular processes, two superior, two inferior. And the body, of course, is larger. The body is the largest. Today we will talk about? Oh, wait. What do you remember for the sacrum? Can you see something?
It has the four pairs of the holes and the base.
Okay, here is the base. Here is the apex. Four
The
pairs
wings.
of openings. Yeah, the wings. Perfect. Here on the lateral surface. What was this? Like an ear. In Latin, auricula. So here is articular surface for the ilium, but it has name auricular surface. It looks like an ear. Okay, here is the promontory, transverse lines, the four openings. Here on the dorsal surface we have crests. This one just on the middle. How we can say median sacral crest. Can you see?
Which slide? We're on slide 27. What we're seeing is 27.
Yeah, 27.
Yeah, but it's not full screen, by the way. Like we can see the whole PowerPoint.
Why?
Because I think you need to stream your whole screen, not just one window.
Oh. Yeah. Sorry. Thank you.
Yeah. No.
So now you can see the full screen, right?
Yeah.
And now you can see how I can move on the slides.
Yeah, we can see everything.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. So on the dorsal surface, you have to, we have see what we can see 5 crests just on the middle, median sacral crest, right? Christus sacralis mediana. On both sides of it, we have medial sacral crest or Christus sacralis mediana, and more laterally, we have another 2 crests, lateral sacral crest, right and left. About the coccyx, it's small bone, rudimentary. We have from CO1 to CO4, again, base, apex, and transverse process, which we can see only on CO of the first coccygeal vertebra. Of course, anterior and posterior surface, and the horns. Questions from the last time? No.
No questions.
Okay, so today we can start with the bones of the thorax. Of course, you know that the thorax is consisted of the ribs and the sternum. The main function is the protect the internal organs in the thoracic cavity, of course. Which are the organs? Of course, heart, lungs, major blood vessels like thoracic aorta, superior and inferior vena cava, and the other, which you will learn about them next semester. So that's the sternum. It has 3 parts. A handle, or in Latin it is called manubrium. The body, corpus sterni. Between them, we have an angle, angulus sterni, which is at the level of the second rib. When you go to the clinic, you have to count the intercostal spaces, and that's the way. First, you have to find the sternal angle, and now you can see that this is the level of the second rib. And of course, 12 pairs of the ribs. That's the cartilage on the anterior side. On the posterior, you can see on the next slides. Now, let's start with the sternum. Of course, flat bone located in the central part of the chest. It connects to the ribs by cartilage. It has three parts, I already told that. We have manubrium, body, and xiphoid process. That's some additional information that they are connected by fibrocartilage. Symphysis manubrium sternalis, between the manubrium and the body. And here is symphysis xiphoid sternalis, between the xiphoid process and the body. What we have on the handle, on the manubrium. You can see some notches here. This one is the suprasternal notch or jugular notch, just on the superior side. After that, on both sides of the jugular notch, we have clavicular notch for the connection with the clavicle. At the lateral sides, we have articular facet for the first rib. And here, on the inferior part of the lateral surface on the handle, on the manubrium, we have half part of the facet for the second rib. So, for the manubrium, you have to remember the jugular notch. On both sides, we have clavicular notch. We have articular facet for the first rib and semi-facet for the second rib. In Latin, the jugular notch is called incisura jugularis, just on the middle of the upper part of the manubrium. On both sides, I told you, we have clavicular notch or incisura clavicularis, of course, right and left. On the lateral border, we have a notch or facet for the first rib, incisura costalis prima. Prima means the one about the first rib. And of course, on the border between the manubrium and the body of the sternum is the notch for the second rib, incisura costalis secunda. But you can see here that the half part of this facet is on the manubrium, the other half part is on the body. And of course, at the point where the body joins the manubrium is located the sternal angle, angus sterni, which serves to define a second rib. I told you that. What we have to know about the body. We have what? Of course, facets for the ribs from third to sixth. And of course, you can see here, again, semi-facet for the seventh rib. So From third to sixth, we have full facets. For second and seventh rib, we have semi-facets. It looks like this on the vertebrae, on the thoracic vertebrae. I told you that the lower border articulates with the xiphoid process, and of course, the third part is xiphoid process. Questions? So you have to remember the three parts: manubrium, body, xiphoid process, the jugular notch, clavicular notch, left and right, notch for the first rib from second to seventh, and the xiphoid process. That's it. Sternal angle, which is at the level of the second rib, and that's it about the sternum. That's the main things. Okay. I will continue with the ribs if you don't have questions. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, Professor, wait, can you repeat the things we need to know again? I'm just writing them down.
You want to repeat?
Just repeat the things we have to remember, the specific things.
Okay, the specific things. You have to remember the three parts of the sternum: manubrium or handle, body, and xiphoid process. Of course, the notches, which are the jugular notch, the two clavicular notches, and we have articular facets for the ribs. For the first rib on the manubrium. For the second rib, half part of the facet is on the manubrium, the other half part is on the body. Here you can see the facets from the for the third to the sixth rib. And of course, we have half part of the facet for the seventh rib on the body, and half part of the same facet for the seventh rib on the xiphoid process. That's it. Sternal angle between the manubrium and the body.
Okay, thank you so much.
No problem. Ribs. They are also flat bones, 12 pairs. They are attached at the back to the thoracic vertebrae. For the same thoracic vertebrae, of course, at the front of the body, most of them are joined by a cartilage to the sternum. First rib for the manubrium, second rib for the manubrium and the body, from third to sixth to the body, and seventh is also half part of it is attached to the body, the other half part is attached to the xiphoid process. Maybe you know that the 11th and 12th rib are known as floating ribs. You can see they don't have anterior attachment to the sternum, while from 1 to 7 have, of course. From 8 to 10, 8, 9, and 10 ribs are called false ribs because their costal cartilage articulates with the costal cartilage of the rib above. You can see 8 to the 7th, 9th to the 8th, 10 to the 9th. They don't attach to the sternum. only to this cartilage part. So true ribs from 1 to 7, false ribs from 8 to 10, and floating ribs are 11 and 12. Which are the parts? Each rib has head, neck, body with tubercle, and costal angle. They are connected to the vertebrae by costovertebral joints, one on the hand and one on the neck. You can see here on the head, we have articular facet for the thoracic vertebrae. Here on the neck, we have articular facet for the transverse process of the vertebrae, thoracic vertebrae. Rib head, we have, or also it is called in Latin caput costae. It has superior and one inferior articular facet. Facies articuaris, capitis costae, superior and inferior. They are separated by a crest, maybe, yeah, here you can see that's the head with the superior and inferior articular facets for the vertebral bodies. They are separated by a crest, crista capitis costae. So, for example, if this is 6th rib, the superior facet is attached to the number. Which one? Which vertebra? Which thoracic vertebra? Number 5, for example. Here, the inferior facet is attached to the number 6. If you remember, each vertebra has superior and inferior costal notch for the head. And actually, the rib is between the two vertebrae. It looks like between the two vertebrae, you can see. Okay, here between the head and the body, we have the other part, which is called neck. Here on the body, we have rib tubercle with articular facet for the transverse process of the vertebra. The costal angle and you can see here this superior and inferior facets for the vertebrae articulate with the superior and inferior costal facets on the vertebrae. The first 11 and 12 ribs are connected to only one vertebra, while the other are connected with 2 vertebrae. One rib with 2 vertebrae, 2 adjacent vertebrae. After the head, we have neck, column costae, which is flattened part. On the upper border of it, we can see crista coli costae, but it's additional information. You can say only neck, rib neck, or column costae. On the border between the body and neck, we can see tuberculum costae, the rib tubercle, with articular facet for the transverse process of the thoracic vertebrae. So that's the, they form the costal vertebral joint. About the body, or corpus costae, We can say that the body has two surfaces, outer and inner, and two margins or edges, superior and inferior. On its back, we can see angulus costae or costal angle here. So that's the outer surface of the rib. Here is the inner surface of the rib body. And the most important thing, on the inner surface of the rib, near its lower edge, there is a groove, which is called sulcus costae. Here you can see on the inner surface, near its lower edge. That's the groove, which is called sulcus costae. And why it's important? Because here we can find the intercostal vessels. You can remember the abbreviation VAN, V-A-N. First, the most upper is the vein. After that is the artery, and below them is the nerve. Intercostal vein, intercostal artery, intercostal nerve. And they lie into this groove. Now you can see that's thoracic vertebrae. That's the body with the costal notch for the rib head. That's the transverse process with the articular surface for the rib tubercle. You can see the two costal vertebral joints. One between the head and the body of the vertebra. The second one between the rib tubercle and the transverse process of the thoracic vertebra. So that's the head. Here is the neck, rib tubercle. That's the body with the rib angle. Here should be the sternum. You can see here. At the back, we have two joints, costovertebral. At the anterior side, we have cartilage, costal cartilage between the rib and the sternum. With the jugular notch, with the clavicular notch for the clavicle. That's the first. That's the notch for the first rib here. The sternal angle between the manubrium and the body, which we can feel below the skin. We can palpate it. And at this level is the second rib. From third to seventh are attached to the body of the sternum. To sixth, actually, the seventh rib is attached at the same time to the body and to the xiphoid process. That's the cartilage part of the rib. The false ribs from 8 to 10. And the floating ribs 11 and 12. That's the anterior view. The posterior view you can see here. The head, which is attached to the body of the vertebra. The neck. After that, we can see here, that's the transverse process of the vertebrae. And here is the rib tubercle. That's the angle here. And after that, the body. And you can see that the first, 11th and 12th are attached only to one vertebrae. The other are between two adjacent vertebrae. Let's talk about the first rib. It's the most curved and of course the shortest. What else? The head is small, rounded, with one articular facet for the body of the first thoracic vertebra. There is no angle here. The upper surface, the most important thing is that the upper surface has two grooves separated by slight ridge, or we can say tubercle, for the attachment of the anterior scalene muscle. That's why we can say scalene tubercle. So, on both sides of this tubercle, we can find these grooves. Here, the groove for the subclavian artery. Here is the groove, the other groove for the subclavian vein. Or in Latin, we can say sulcus venae subclaviae and sulcus arteriae subclaviae. You can see one groove, the other groove. The undersurface is smooth. There is no grooves. And that these things are important for the first rib. On the second rib, we have only one rough, which is called tuberositas musculi scaleni anterioris, the same muscle, musculus scalenus anterior. Now, you can see this is the second rib, so this is the first. Here you can see the head. Again, we have neck with tubercle, and that's the body, which is flattened up to down. We don't have angle. That's the grooves for the subclavian artery. That's the groove for the subclavian vein. Here is the tubercle of the anterior scalene muscle. Between them. You can see again here, head, neck, rib tubercle without angle. That's the groove for the artery. Here is the groove for the vein. The blue points are for the insertions of some muscles. We have three muscles here: musculus scalenus anterior, medius, and posterior, and that's the insertion places of these muscles. But the most important for now is this one: insertion of anterior scalene muscle or scalene tubercle between these two grooves for the artery, subclavian artery, and for the subclavian vein. The red ones are for the origins. What's the difference with the second rib? Of course, you can see the first rib is the smallest and shortest. The next one, the second rib, is bigger. We have again head, neck, tubercle, but here we have angle. And of course, I told you here, this one, we have one rough for the musculus scalenus anterior. Here, this one, only this. You can see again first rib. I told you that the other ribs has outer and inner surface, but the first rib has upper and lower. The lower surface is smooth. The upper, we have these two grooves. for the subclavian artery and for the subclavian vein. Here is the tubercle between them, the head, neck, rib tubercle. That's the tubercle for the muscle. And this is the superior view, which is not smooth. Internal border, external border, the rib tubercle. If you can see, this is again the superior surface. Here is the scalene tubercle. That's the groove for the subclavian artery. That's the groove for the subclavian vein on the body. Second rib, which is bigger. Again, we have head, neck, rib tubercle, but here we can see an angle and the body. The only thing you have to remember is that serratus anterior, tuberosity. Serratus anterior, yeah, serratus anterior too, but the most, I think here is a mistake. I told you this one. For the scalenus. No, wait a minute, just a minute. On the text, we have a mistake on the text. Sorry, for serratus anterior, not scalenus. Tuberosity for the serratus anterior muscle. You can see here an example for the 10th rib. Of course, again we have head. This is the inner surface. So here we can see the costal groove, sulcus costae, where we can find the intercostal, the main intercostal neurovascular bundle, the vein, the artery, and the nerve. The intercostal vein, artery, and nerve. That's the external surface here. If this is the head, here should be the thoracic vertebra. Here is the sternum. Again, costal angle, articular facet of the head, again, superior, you can see superior articular facet, inferior articular facet, the crest between them, the neck and angle, and of course the body. That's the floating ribs, 11 and 12. We have head and articular facet of the head. It's almost straight, this rib. We don't have angle here also. Questions? Do you have any questions?
No.
Okay. So, I told you, when you have to talk about the bones of the thorax, you have to say that the thorax is consisted of the ribs and the sternum. Of course, for the sternum, you have to say that it has three parts: the manubrium, the body, and the xiphoid process. About the manubrium, you can see here, and of course you can say that it has one jugular notch on the superior margin here, just on the middle. On both sides of it are the clavicular notches, right and left, which is actually articular facet for the clavicle. If you remember, oh no, I think we didn't talk about the clavicle, but you can see that clavicle has sternal extremity, which is connected with this articular facet, and they form a sternoclavicular joint. So, jugular notch, clavicular notch. On the lateral surface, we have articular facet for the first rib here. On the inferior part of the manubrium, we have semifacet for the second rib. The costal angle, the sternal angle between the manubrium and the body, which serves to define the level of the second rib. After that, on the body, we have articular facets, full articular facets for the from the third to sixth rib, and one semi-facet for the seventh rib. On the xiphoid process, we have only one semi-facet for the seventh rib. The joints maybe, or the connections between the manubrium with the body and xiphoid process is called symphysis. So between the manubrium and the body of the sternum is called symphysis manubrio-sternalis. Between the body of the sternum and xiphoid process is called symphysis xipho-sternalis. That's the anterior view. Again, the manubrium, jugular notch, clavicular notch. Here is the articular facet for the first rib. Here is the articular semifacet for the second rib, of course, and on the body we have the same facet for the second rib. You can see here 3, 4, 5, 6 from third to sixth rib, and one semifacet for the seventh rib. On the xiphoid process, we have one semifacet for the seventh rib. You can see again jugular notch, clavicular notch, first costal notch, second one here between the manubrium and the body, from third, fourth, fifth, sixth for the ribs, and the seventh costal notch between the body and the xiphoid process for the seventh rib. The inferior end of the sternum is called xiphoid process. About the ribs, there are 12 pairs. From 1 to 7 are called true ribs. From 8 to 10 are called false ribs. And 11 and 12 are floating ribs. They don't have an interior attachment to the sternum. You can see that the false ribs articulates with the costal cartilage of the superior ribs, the rib above. Again, each rib has head, neck, body, angle with the tubercle, except the first and maybe the 12th. But the first rib doesn't have costal angle. What we have on the head, I told you, on the head we have two articular facets for the vertebral body, one superior, one inferior. They are separated by a crest, crista capitis costae. Between the head and the body, there is a neck. After that, we have tubercle, rib tubercle, with articular facets for the transverse process of the thoracic vertebrae. Here is the angle, that's the body with outer and inner surface. At the lower margin of the inner surface is located the costal groove, sulcus costae, where we can find the intercostal vein, artery, and nerve. What's the difference between the other ribs and the first rib? Of course, the first rib doesn't have angle. We have upper and lower surface. The lower surface is smooth. On the upper surface, we can see two grooves, one for the subclavian artery, you can see here, one for the subclavian artery. Actually, near to the head is this one for the subclavian artery. This one here is for the subclavian vein. Between them, we have a tubercle for the insertion of the anterior scalene muscle. That's the head, the neck, rib tubercle without angle. That's the body with upper and lower surface. Lower surface is smooth. Upper surface, we can find two grooves. Sulcus arteriae subclaviae, sulcus venae subclaviae, separated by this tubercle. Second rib, bigger. We have costal angle here and some places for the insertions and origins of the muscles. What is this? Relations and attachments of left first rib. You can see some ligaments here, costal transverse ligament. We can talk about them at the end of the semester, of this semester, after the bones. We can start with arthrology and we can talk about joints, about ligaments. So near to the head, you can see here sympathetic trunk, intercostal vein, artery, nerve. You can see here the subclavian artery. I told you near to the head is the first groove for the subclavian artery, and here is the artery. That's the vein. Between them, here should be the tubercle of the scalenum musculus scalenus anterior. Here are the insertion and origin points of the other muscles in this region. Another ligament. That's the muscle here, of course. So now you can see subclavian artery and subclavian vein in these grooves. Sulcus arteriae subclaviae, sulcus venae subclaviae. You can see them. Scalene tubercle, groove for the subclavian artery, groove for the subclavian vein. Head, neck, rib tubercle. That's it. Without angle, only body with upper and lower surface. Second rib. We have angle here and serratus anterior tuberosity. And that's an examples for the other ribs. 10th, 12th, and that's it. And because we have time, I want to start with the bones of the upper limb. If you don't have questions, I will continue with the bones of the upper limb. Okay, so each upper limb is divided into the shoulder girdle here and free upper limb. Of course, the shoulder girdle is consisted of the clavicle and scapula. The free upper limb consists of three regions. We have arm, or in Latin we can say brachium, the forearm or antebrachium, and hand, or in Latin is called manus. Okay. You can see that the shoulder girdle, about the shoulder girdle, here is the clavicle, that's the scapula. On the arm we have only one long bone, which is called humerus. Here on the forearm we have two long bones, radius and ulna. And of course, about the hand bones, we have carpal, metacarpal, phalanges of the hand, etc. You can see that later. Let's start with the bones of the shoulder girdle. I told you there are two, clavicula and scapula. They are connected to each other, of course, and to the upper limb, which are the joints between the scapula and the humerus is glenohumeral joint or articulatio humeri. Between the acromion scapulae and the clavicle is the acromioclavicular joint, articulatio acromioclavicularis. And I told you that's the sternal end, and between the sternum here, the clavicular notch of the sternum, and the sternal end of the clavicle is the sternoclavicular joint, articulatio sternoclavicularis. The clavicle is a S-shaped long bone. It has two ends, lateral and medial, or you can say the extremitas acromialis, extremitas sternalis in Latin. So the medial end or sternal end is rounded. It articulates with the manubrium of the sternum and forms the sternoclavicular joint. Here you can see the sternal facet. That's the body, and that's the lateral end or acromial end, which is flattened and articulates with the acromion of the scapula and form the acromioclavicular joint. What else? The clavicula consists of a body, and I told you two end parts, medial and lateral, or extremitas sternalis, extremitas acromialis. About extremitas sternalis, I told you, rounded, irregularly shaped. It has an articular surface for the clavicular notch of the sternum. And on the lower surface, you can see the impression by one ligament, impressio ligamenti costoclavicularis. About the acromial end or extremitas acromialis, it is flattened. Of course, it has an articular surface for the acromion of the scapula. On the lower surface is located tuberculum. We have actually two things here. We have tuberculum conoideum and linea trapezoidea. They are actually places for the attachment of these ligaments. You can see here. So, sternal or medial end with sternal facet, acromial or lateral end with acromial facet. That's the lower surface, that's the upper surface, that's the lower surface of the clavicle. Near to the sternal end, we have costal tuberosity. subclavian groove, of course, and near to the acromial facet on the lower surface we have linea trapezoidea and tuberculum conoideum. Linea trapezoidea for ligamentum trapezoideum, tuberculum conoideum for ligamentum conoideum. Again, you can see here superior inferior view. For about the superior surface, it's smooth. Acromial end, sternal end, the body, S-shaped form. For the inferior view, you can see near to the sternal facet impression for this ligament, costoclavicular ligament. Watch me. What does mean costoclavicular ligament? Between the first rib and the clavicle. That's why it is called costoclavicular. Near to the acromial end, you can see the conoid tubercle and the trapezoid line. On the lower surface of also we have subclavian groove. Some muscle origins and insertions. That's for the end part of this semester and for the next semester. Not for now. This is some additional information, of course. That's the lower surface of the clavicle. So you can see again the impression for costoclavicular ligament, tuberculum conoideum, and linea trapezoidea. Sternal end, near to the sternal end is this impression, near to the acromial end are tuberculum conoideum and linea trapezoidea. Again, here, of course, that's the tuberculum conoideum. Here is the trapezoid line. That's the subclavian groove. Of course, nutrient foramen, each bone has this foramen. It's not important thing. That's the body and the impression for this ligament, costoclavicular ligament. The scapula is, you can see, triangular bone, flat triangular bone with two surfaces, three borders, and three angles. And of course, three processes. So, the front of the scapula, also known as the costal or ventral surface. That's the ventral view with anterior surface, or also called facies costalis, costal surface, which is convex and is called, here is located the subscapular fossa, fossa subscapularis. That's the dorsal view or posterior view with two fossae here. But let's start with the back. So, the back of the scapula, also called the dorsal surface or facies posterior, is subdivided into two parts by the spine of the scapula. So that's the spina scapulae, which is divided the dorsal surface. One upper and smaller part, which is called fossa above the spine, fossa supraspinata. Below the spine is the other fossa, which is bigger and is called fossa infraspinata. Fossa supraspinata, fossa infraspinata, and between them is spina scapulae. Laterally, the spine continues into the humeral process, or in Latin, acromion scapulae. There is a tubercle, tuberculum deltoideum. Between the spine of the scapula and the acromion is the acromion angle, angulus acromii. You can see here. That's the spine. That's the acromion of the scapula. And here is the angle of the scapula. Of the acromion, sorry. And of course, the acromion has articular surface for the clavicle. Adjacent to it is the coracoid process. So that's the acromion scapulae, angulus acromion, spina scapulae. That's the dorsal surface. Above the spina scapulae is fossa supraspinata. Below it is fossa infraspinata. Acromion process, coracoid process. You can see the anterior surface. I told you this is fossa subscapularis. Subscapularis. Here you can see the acromion scapulae with the articular facet for the clavicle. That's the coracoid process. Okay. I told you the scapula has three borders. Margus superior. At its lateral part, we can find the incisura suprascapularis, which is converted into a foramen by the superior transverse ligament. So that's the superior margin. This is the medial margin. This is the lateral margin. Margo superior, margo medialis, margo lateralis. Here on the superior margin, we can find suprascapular notch, incisura suprascapularis. If here above this notch is a transverse ligament, superior transverse ligament, this notch is converted to the foramen. Foramen scapula or foramen suprascapularis, or it doesn't have name. You can see also only incisura suprascapularis, which is converted into a foramen when we have ligament above this notch. What we find here, we can find suprascapular nerve. About the lateral border, margo lateralis. Here, on the lateral border, we have one cavity, which is called glenoid cavity or cavitas glenoidalis in Latin, which is actually articular surface for the head of the humerus. About the medial border, nothing especially, just the longest border. We have three angles: superior, inferior, and lateral. And I told you about the lateral border and the lateral angle. It bears the glenoid fossa, cavitas glenoidalis, which is actually articular surface for the head of the humerus. Below, above and below it, we have two tubercles, tuberculum supraglenoidale, which is above, and tuberculum glenoidale, infraglenoidale, which is below the glenoid cavity. We have neck of the scapula, which is called column scapulae, which surrounds the head. So you can see these things here. That's the anterior view, that's the posterior view. About the anterior view, that's the subscapular fossa, fossa subscapularis. That's the superior margin, medial margin, lateral margin. Here on the lateral margin, we can see the glenoid cavity, cavitas glenoidalis. That's the acromion scapulae, that's the coracoid process. From the dorsal view, first we can see the spine, spina scapulae, which divides the dorsal surface into two parts. Above the spine is fossa supraspinata. Below the spine is fossa infraspinata. Laterally, spina scapulae continues like acromion scapulae, and between the acromion and the spine is angulus acromii. Here on the acromion we have articular facet for the clavicle. And what you can see here, glenohumeral joint, okay, the head of the humerus is this one. Coracocavicular ligament, that's not for now. Here, that's the glenoid cavity. And I told you on the superior, above the cavity is tuberculum supraglenoidale. Below it, here is tuberculum infraglenoidale. Superior margin, medial margin, lateral margin with this cavity. That's the acromion, that's the coracoid process. Here is the superior angle. Here is the inferior angle. The glenoid cavity is actually the lateral angle. And between the cavity and the body of the scapula is the neck of the scapula. You can see here, acromion, coracoid process, subscapular fossa. Fossa supraspinata, fossa infraspinata, that's from the dorsal view. And that's the lateral view. Actually, you can see here again, acromion, scapulae, coracoid process, that's the lateral margin, lateral angle with glenoid fossa. Above the glenoid fossa is tuberculum supraglenoidale, below it is tuberculum infraglenoidale. Questions? Where we can find these notes on the portal. I will give you this presentation when it's ready. Sorry, I am a cardiology resident. I don't have enough time, but I'm trying. So when I finish this presentation, I will give you. For the colloquium, it will be ready. And you can read from it about the colloquium. Okay? Do you have any questions about the bones of the thorax or the bones of the shoulder girdle? Maybe you don't have questions. Do you have any answer from the embassy? Do you know when you can be here?
Allah